Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Brace Yourself podcast. My name is Ben Beaumont. I am the second best podcast host on this show. I'm here with my co-host, Simon Boys, aka Brian Main from Queen. And this week, we are joined by a special guest all the way from Canada. It's going to be fantastic. He has a very unique vantage point of the access industry, and we're going to take you on a journey from a global view to focus on Canada and the things that they're working on, and then all the way down to look at what it's like to work in Canada and the job sites that they have there. It's going to be absolutely great. I imagine they face the same problems of all of us, but let's find out, and we'll see what the scaffolding industry is like from their lens as they look at it. We'll have all our usual features. It's going to be fantastic. We've got a great penthouse to doghouse lined up for you at the end. And I'm really looking forward to seeing Simon try and maybe it'll be our guest. We'll see. Go through the doghouse routine. And so without further ado, let's get into it. Let's meet the guest. So he's joining us all the way from Toronto in Canada. In 2006, he co-founded a hardscape, and we had to look that up. Apparently, it's like landscaping, but more manly stuff, he says. Installation company with his twin brother, who is an identical twin, and I can vouch for that for sure. He featured on HGTV for the Starlight Guard in Toronto, then pivoted into industrial work in where? Saskatoon? Yes. In Alberta. In 2017, he founded Hinton Access, where he's now CEO. He is the president of the Access Association of Canada. He is founder of Scaffold Insight, a scaffold management software platform, which is really, really good. And he is the director of Rise, a VR-based immersive training program. He was also recognized in 2025 as a top 40 under 40. Brandon Marton, welcome to our show. Woo!
Thank you very much, Ben. That was a mouthful.
Mate, I've been rehearsing that all afternoon. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. Glad to hear it come sum up, when someone's talking about you like that.
Mate, quite an achievement. But thanks for joining us. Like looking through the notes here, all the things you've done, it's quite a journey. Not a traditional career path. I think if you look at going from, let's call it manly landscaping, into TV shows with hospitals, and then through to the industrial work, running your own business. Now you're a software nerd, loves everything software and VR and all that sort of crazy jazz. So, mate, how did all this thing come about, and how did one thing lead to the next? Like, what was the transition points?
Well, you mentioned I have a doppelganger there. So that's one way to be very productive while people think it's just you. And the top 40 at 40 thing, I'm just going to say I barely met the margin there. So, just crossed that threshold. But honestly,
I you look construction. Great for 29, by the way, Brandon. Great for 29, mate.
It's the hair. It's the hair. Honestly, everything was very construction related to begin with. And I was just fascinated with sort of like what's behind the walls. How does it get done? How does it get built? And so, natural curiosity kind of leads you deeper and deeper into that rabbit hole. You eventually land in industrial, where like everything's big and looking to kill you is really what's happening. And you just keep learning.
That's really, really cool. You're working across three significant things right now: Hinton Access, Scaffold Insight, and Rise. And then obviously you've got the presidency of the Access Association of Canada going on. Little job on the side, I imagine.
Recently
doesn't take a lot of time.
Congratulations.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. So what ties all of that together at the moment? Are they just single things you have to, compartmentalize, or is there a thread that ties it all together?
And it does tie together for me. You've got that industrial construction industry, right? And for me, access, and again, I'm so confident this is a global problem, but not to segue right into things, but it's not recognized as a trade. And so you sort of, when you get into the industry, you're trying to find information for yourself. You're trying to figure out what's the best training you can get. Again, tying back to everything wants to kill me. And so I better learn how to survive and work safely. COVID was a good little catalyst for what else can we do here to make sure we don't fall behind. And you realize how far behind things are. And I mean, that was the catalyst to everything. Yeah. So they're very well connected. It's like a web I don't really change hats as I'm thinking about what I'm doing. I just, change the focus of the conversation.
Yeah. It's funny, everyone that we talk to has some kind of crazy story about how they actually got into the scaffold industry, and most of us actually got into it by accident. What's your excuse? How come you got into it and why are you still here?
By accident. Same thing when coming from my artscaping company, I headed to Western Canada on a whim. It's a much longer story of following a friend, but, went into this industrial world, the oil sands of Canada. I had no idea what anything was. I thought I was landing in a forest. Turns out I ended up in the prairies. You think you're going to be on the oil rigs here and chugging away, but nope, it was, farmlands as far as the eye can see in a potash plant. But actually started off as an operator because I had that, skill in a background, and something changed in the way they were getting unionized. And I switched over to laboring. I showed up to work. So right away you get promoted. This guy's a supervisor because I just actually showed up. And met the Scaffold group, and we aligned very well. And I saw how things were very paper-based with everything, and just fell into it. So just started my path there. And, there's a longer story to that, but it just seems like it was always, there was something missing in the industry. And it just, my career just sort of fell into like, well, what's missing? How do we solve that? Simon, I love your tagline, solving complex problems, right? And although there were some complex problems to solve, a lot of it was pretty simple. It's like, how are we still doing this on paper? It's just,
I think the day that we interview somebody or talk with somebody that says, I grew up wanting to be a scaffolder, I loved everything about it, it was a career choice, might be the day we give it away, because can't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, I'm going to make a remark on that, because 100% I agree with you. I apologize, I'm losing my voice for if I sound raspy, but that's exactly what Rise is setting out to do. COVID was a catalyst to that. We had this issue and we couldn't do training for anybody. So we came up with this training platform. We'll build it in VR. We'll send them to the construction site, but we'll send it out to you. Obviously, all the modules I built were very scaffolding focused. And so the idea was to introduce, youth, marginalized groups, geographically isolated individuals to the trades, but specifically scaffolding. If I say to you, what's a trade? Someone's going to say an electrician, carpenter, and we seem very sort of residential on that. No one knows what a scaffolder is until you're in it or you're using it. You're like, oh, this is scaffolding. Now I get it. Building these programs into high schools and supporting youth corrections. Like they can I want to see them make the decision I want to get involved in this very safe industry and make good money doing it. That's my goal with that stuff.
Well,
very safe industry where everything's trying to kill you.
Where everything's trying to kill you. Yeah.
I was trying to think of something witty to say on the back of that, but I
leave the wittiness to me, Ben.
I might as well not change that bit of a lifetime. So look, we were talking about earlier about kind of taking on a bit of a journey, something big. Talk about the global challenge, the scaffolding industry we all work in, and we are genuinely on 3 continents here, looking at it from all our individual perspectives. That's really cool. Then we'll take it down to Canada, then we'll take it down to the project level in the Canadian job sites, and let's go on that journey now and see where it leads. This episode is powered by Leeches, the one-stop marketplace for the scaffolding and construction industry, with over 30,000 product lines in their online store. They've got everything you need to deliver your project to industry-leading standards. And as a customer for the last 20 years, I know they get you what you need when you need it. If you head over to their online store at leeches.com, be sure to use the discount code Brace Yourself for an exclusive 15% discount as a thank you for being a subscriber to this show. Shall we? So from there then, Brandon, in that respect, from where you're sitting, both industry leader, National Association president, what do you see as the kind of biggest issues facing the global scaffolding industry right now?
Yeah, it's going to be the standard of skills across the globe. And that's 100% going to tie into the fact that scaffolding for the broader global perspective is not recognized as a trade. It's wild. And first I want to say kudos to you guys for setting up this forum, for one, this platform where we have this international connection talking about this. This is exactly what our industry needs. This is exactly how we're going to be progressive and innovative and moving things forward. And this is exactly how, as an association, we can march along to government and say, the world is talking about this. We need to get caught up. But isn't it wild? Like, it's just how, and you can be a truck driver and get here it's a red seal. You can be a hairdresser and get a red seal. It's not to knock anything else, any other trades. It's the fact that they've developed the platform and the standards and the process for getting, training all along the way. And then scaffolding is just like, this engineered stuff that we do all the dangerous work to make sure that everybody else can work safe. And there's no official legislative path in recognizing it as a trade. It's industry regulated in that sense, right? So that to me is the biggest issue, I think, globally.
Yeah. And I guess you're in a unique position. You get to talk to different leaders around the world as part of your role at the Access Association president. Every different country's got different challenges, different issues that we're facing. Where do you see some of the countries that are miles ahead and others that are playing catch up? What's your thoughts on that?
Good question. I'll align this this is my opinion, because I'm probably neglecting countries I haven't spoken to. I don't know anything going on in South Africa right now. Like, I don't know. China is quite, it's very unique there with the fact that they still use bamboo with intention. Okay. They do it, and there's regulation around that. There's the good and bad we could talk about.
Imminently, right? Maybe changing imminently after that big fire. Tragic.
100%.
Genuinely terrible. But
yeah, right now, and then people they're doing it for good luck, right? Like, there's everything that goes with it. So it's very interesting there.
We should have a chat about bamboo scaffolding at some point on this show, because it's fascinating and it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant.
It is.
But anyway, let's not.
Yeah, I'll bring in some National Geographic stuff that was put together on it. It's actually really cool. There's going back to one of the original things. I was a nerd first. This is where the data and the software and everything came. But I also loved construction and, just got into it. And anyway, is going back to that. There's the nerd part just coming out. But so to your question, I want to say, I think if I would look where the history is. And, that's why I mentioned China, but I do believe that Europe is generally more advanced than the rest of the world, and actively trying to set a standard globally. The Middle East is really catching up to that and saying, okay, we have a fresh slate. We can set our own standard and start to implement those things. So North America, is I would say we're very disparate. In the States, every state runs itself. And in Canada, every province is also setting its own regulation. We actually do have one province in Canada, Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan, that does already recognize scaffolding as a trade. And their construction association, has put out basically what we should be putting out federally. And Ministry of Labor for that province is on board. So really good standard to have set, and it allows the rest of the provinces to take a lead off of their page. So I still think, though, progressively, it's Europe that's got some of the most advanced standards.
We'll soon try and disprove that when we look at a photograph in the doghouse section from the UK. We seem to do a brilliant job of just picking out the bottom 5%. But it's funny what you're saying there, right? In the UK, often we've got, I'm beginning to believe a bit, when I first entered the industry, we had a perception of ourselves as being quite good at scaffolding. The reality is, yes, there are certain things going in our favour, but it's not as true as it might have been 25 years ago. It's definitely not. But there are certain things in the UK that help us align. For example, we don't have different legislative requirements in each county of the UK. England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland are not all operate under the same British standard, right? When that allows us to align in it, even though we're this tiny little, island, but that is a distinct advantage over you guys, and certainly in Australia, right, Simon, where they've got different states doing different things, and getting everyone together and aligning is a challenge. Now that kind of segues me. I deliberately mentioned it because I thought, I wanted to ask you, one of the things that we were talking about prepping for the show, right, Brandon, we were talking about digital adoption. And I think this is one of the things that UK does actually quite well. It's a construction industry generally, but we spoke about digital adoption, having access to the right information at the right time being a global problem, right? To make really good decisions. and in temporary works when things are moving really, really quick, that's really important. So why do you think as a scaffolding industry, generally speaking, we're kind of far behind other relatively similar industries when it comes to technology and kind of what do we need to do to change that? What's going to generate the shift?
Yeah, it's wild, actually. One of the main issues, I think, is the fact that scaffolding is generally looked at as indirect when it comes to costing. And, to simply explain that, we are treated as the last needed because we are cost overhead, period. So the longer they can delay bringing you on site, the better it is for the project. But then they don't recognize that that's false. Where we need to go as an industry is bringing the scaffolding group, whomever that might be, in at the same time they're doing planning. When engineering is still being done, we need to have a say at the table when they're talking about engineering. But part of the issue is that there's generally not a platform to do that, and there's not a place to be planted to store that information, so that if you did do a good plan, have something to execute it. Obviously, one of the issues that I've seen. Right.
And I just asked a question, Brandon. In Canada, and this is going to be a very broad answer, and I appreciate that. How many times do you think on a project, scaffold or access is designed pre-tender?
You might get one build, and honestly, that might be a scenario build for a bid. That's about it.
What's the question for you, Simon? What do you think that is in Australia? Like, what I mean by that is, so the principal contractor's got some scaffold design done, thought about it, done some planning, and then takes that scheme out to tender with the scaffold contractors. How often does that happen in Australia, Simon?
We're actually in a little bit of a shift towards that now. If you had to ask me that 6 months ago, I would say 0 to 1%.
Right.
But there is quite a few, mostly in the tier 1, tier 2 space now, that are actually starting to evolve their processes, and actually, whether they do the designs themselves or they engage a design consultant to actually create the design and do the model pre-tender. And the value that they're getting from that is actually sending that model out to the contractors. The contractors then can see the model, and then they're only pricing what's included in the model. So when they get all of their 10 different tenders back from 10 different contractors, then all they need to go through is compare price, because all of the scopes are exactly the same.
That's right.
So just part of that is, it's not so much to engage early design to actually solve problems. They're actually looking at it more from a tender efficiency point of view, is where it just makes their job easier, because they outsource the design to somebody else, send that out to everybody else. Then when they come back, they de-risked it, and they're just comparing apples for apples.
Are you on a journey to that in Canada?
100%. And that's what I was going to ask. To my comment earlier, for the majority, it's just not being done. But the project owners are asking for this. The problem is in the past, the answer has just been, well, there's nothing to do that. There's not a good way to do plans and designs. There's not a good way to store that. So what are we going to do? We'll do that when we get into the planning phase. So I was going to ask you too, Simon, like, do you hear more as well on the side of the project owner, that they're looking for a solution to something that says, hey, we'll have some insight into what you're doing. We want to see that you are planning this work, and then we want to prove it as you're looking at your designs.
Yeah. And I think as we move into the technology age now, where everybody's now aware of technology, it's more accessible. Everybody can now use it. It's not as hard as what it used to be. It's not as expensive as what it used to be. So now there's really no excuse for not being able to plan and execute properly. And I think you made a good point in terms of, previously it was just all too hard. People didn't have the tools, they didn't have the knowledge, they didn't have the access to do it. But now we've got no excuses. It's becoming more and more, expected.
Yeah. Well, what the catalyst of that was, I'm going to go back to COVID, the QRs. It's just the idea that we would order off a menu without touching it. It really, it's like it pushed the iPhone into everybody's hand and said, you can do technology too. And that, I think that's where it became acceptable.
I'll just add my 2 cents worth on that comment about tier 1 contractors getting the design done. About 10 years ago, maybe a bit longer, about 2015, 2016, we started doing that in my consulting business. And we grew the business 200% in about 2 years. Basically shifting the design time, moving it up the project supply chain, and starting focusing on tier 1s. and we designed schemes for them, but we also did all of the scoping, all of the scope package, if you like, pulled that all together in a design document, and then helped them plan it and coupled the scaffold design up with the design of the interface around the temporary work. So the ground assessments, structural assessments of the building, and all that kind of stuff, and then sub the whole lot. I'll tell you this, this is an interesting fact for you. And if you by all means, go and quote it in your role, in your presidential role, Brandon. But in the UK, whether they like to admit it or not, civil engineering tier one contractors generally overspend on their scaffold package. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll ask you.
Don't say.
What do you think, right? I'll ask you. What do you think it is between the price place the order at, that they think the package value at is, and then the price they final account at? What do you think the package growth is in percentage terms between those two numbers, typically on civil engineering projects in the UK? What do you think, Simon? Any idea?
I would say it would add another 40% to the total price.
Well, Brandon, thoughts?
I'm going to say, I'll say if scaffolding was about 15% bid for the package, they'll end up at 25-30.
From leveraging my network, I asked a lot of people this question, and it transpired that it was anywhere between 70 and 120% contract growth. So on some jobs, it would double. And by doing the service we just described earlier, we'd take that 70 to 100% down to 15%. And there's always stuff you can't foresee, right? There's always that bit you didn't, or planning goes wrong, or something goes bad, or you just can't, you'll never make it zero. But 70% is just an unacceptable level, and people just didn't know why. You know what I mean? And when we were linking this back to what we're talking about, technology, right information at the right time, we were doing it back then with 2D drawings. You do it now with the technology that we're all part of. It's even better. It's so much more powerful, and that kind of thing. So, probably we could go down that rabbit hole anymore. And I think...
But just before we change gears on that too, I think, Brandon, you made a point there in passing, which is actually really important too, because you talked about 15% of the total project value being access. I think that changes quite considerably depending on the market where you are. Like if you're in the commercial space doing a high-rise building or something, that's probably closer to maybe 3-4%. Whereas in the industrial space, it could be 15 up to 30%. And the reality of it is all of the other trades that are associated around it all rely on access, right? So everybody needs access to be doing it. It's a critical path. If the access is not ready, everything else stops. But the reality of it is like you said, it's just undervalued and underappreciated and not brought into the planning scope soon enough. 100%. And then that actually delays the whole project. So Ben, back to your point in terms of the cost blowouts, access can completely make or break a project purely on your planning. And
honestly, we could have a conversation about maybe we do this in the future, the commercial planning of scaffolding packages for tier one contractors. Do a CPD episode for it, because it is so mind blowing how small poor decisions compound up over the project to turn into a 70%, 80%, 90% overspend. They're just, and basically just, they're just blasé about it. Oh yeah, well, if you take our risk part and then you add on our prelims, and as long as
change order, but
you've got to be a better way than doing that.
Yeah.
It's all education. People don't know what they don't know. And, they got to get out of the mindset of, hey, it's going to cost us $1,000 or $2,000 to engage a contractor to do a design up front. It's money that we don't have to spend currently because that person's only looking at their job with their blinkers on. They're not looking at the whole life cycle of the project. So it's an education piece, in my opinion.
And just before we move on from that, I agree. The whole thing is the guys putting together these bid packages and the coordinators trying to manage a project. They have no idea about what it takes to do scaffolding and what's involved and what the costs are. And so they're trying to come up with all kinds of creative ways of pricing by, volume and deck and leg feet instead of just the time and material. But when we get to a place, and I, again, very much believe as part of my whole shtick is having information is going to level the conversation across the board. It's not just for the scaffold company. It's also for the project. It's also for the project owners. And what that means is when we eliminate all the guesswork and we start to really focus on what the actuals are, we can come back to the table and know what our costs should be and work together on projects. It means the project is going to spend what they should spend, and the scaffold companies are going to make more money. And that's the whole idea, is that we're making money because we're doing good work instead of chaos is cash. Because if efficiently.
Well-
If you rely on chaos as cash, it's money now, but then they never want to work with you again.
The thing is, Brandon, it's the manifestation of price-based decisions instead of value-based decisions. And if you confuse one with the other, it ends up in a race to the bottom, ultimately. And actually, the race to the bottom ends up in everything being more expensive, which is a mind blow for some QSers in the construction. They just don't get it.
You. Yeah, you. You know I'm talking to you. What are you doing right now? Get your ass over to scaffplan.com, check out all the features, watch a demo, download a free trial today, and see how Scaffplan will absolutely transform your operations. Get there now.
Let's bring it down. We've talked a bit about a global level, and we've all related to that stuff, right? So I think we should ship into talk about Canada, and let's learn a bit from Brandon about what it's like over there. Why don't you, for our international listeners and Simon and I, give us the lay of the land? What's unique about the scaffolding industry in Canada? How is it structured? How is it regulated? And what's it like day to day? What does that mean in practice?
Great White North. Okay. So I might have some bias about the Canadian industry. I do see our industry as a growing industry. It's like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. Everybody in the industry, the international players that cross the borders. But I feel like, and again, I'll take this as personal opinion, but I feel like there are some standards that we are spearheading. The Canadian oil sands is a great example of that. This was a unique place in the world where it was very important that they're incredibly efficient. Now, this is related to the industry, less so on scaffolding, but like you said, especially in that world, and I talk a lot about industrial because I feel like it does touch everything. And it's very translatable down to the commercial and residential sectors. But, with the oil sands, efficiency matters. They know things down to the minute. And so they've started processes like advanced work-phase planning and somehow guessing at it. Again, this was on paper back in the day. They know to the minute the norms of like you're going to swing a hammer and you're going to tap a wedge and it's going to be this. What we're seeing in the industry now is a shift from tube and clamp to system style. They're doing the math and saying that it's with the right planning and you have design in advance, it's more efficient. They know exactly what it's going to be and it's easier to install. It's also less risk. So there's a number of outcomes that are coming from that. So we're seeing a big shift in that. We're seeing a lot of change in access from ladders, where built-in ladders, anything like that, to actually building in stair systems into this. Another reason why they're going stair. And a lot of that has to do with emergency egress. You have a man-down situation on any site, commercial or industrial. How are you getting to them? And so safety's been always a big part of the conversation. It's like, and again, I'm speaking on behalf of the companies that want to do well. Where we're going to get into the doghouse there, where it's like, oh, they're looking for every way to get around these things. But for the most part, people who want to make sure that everybody goes home to their families every day, these are the things that they're looking at, saying, okay, we need to consider every situation, every scenario, and how does access play into that? And so, from an association side, we've seen our association, the growth has been considerable in the last 8 years. It's not massive numbers like the US has, but, just from actually, I'll make a point on that. In the last 30 years, we couldn't fill our board. It's a volunteer. We volunteered on the board, but we have 15 board seats and we couldn't fill it. And this is the first year we actually had 21 volunteers on the slate, and we had to do our vote for the first time to actually put people in. So huge interest coming into seeing the changes. Legislatively, regionally, it's diverse. We've got different provinces that each create their own regulation, and one of our goals, particularly as an association, but also as a member in the industry, we want to see that there is a standard across the country. So we have lots of room to grow, lots of examples to take from the rest of the world. And I think part of my role, especially getting to know guys like yourselves, getting to understand what the rest of the world is doing and aligning ourselves with stuff like that. I think we can just do better as a country that way. Yeah.
So those changes you mentioned in terms of, moving from tube and clamp or tube and fitting to system and changing your access from ladders to stairs, is that driven by the association as a whole or driven by the end users or driven by the contractors? Where's that driven from?
A good question as well. It's It's not coming out of the association, at least not yet. We've done some gaps analysis and issued some best practices, but that was definitely driven from industry itself. But like I say, Canada is like, it's the big city with a small town feel. We've got a huge land mass, but we've got everybody knows each other in the association, companies, we go to the same events. And so these conversations are coming out of industry. So there might be an indirect relation, but it wasn't something that had to be spearheaded directly from the association. But industries, you can see that industry's pushing it.
Yeah. I mean, another thing when we spoke, which relates to what Simon was talking about, is you guys as Canadian Access Association, you said you put a lot of work into producing guidance and information, right? And I think you said, but some business owners are not always using it. And I think I've challenged you and said, look, is it a quality of information problem or is it a quantity of information problem?
Yeah.
To get it, does it actually exist and they're not reading it, or is there not enough and they can't get it to them? So, how do you actually get it into the hands of the people that need it then? And whose responsibility is it to actually do that?
Again, great question. Because the legislation says the onus is on the end user. And I don't always like that. It's true, but it's a way of protecting, the employers and saying, you have a job to gain this knowledge. But I do agree we can do a better job. It's part of how I got into the industry. I had questions. I had no idea where to go. I went to the Canadian Association. I went to the American Association. We joined both because I figured I could, figure out something in the fine print. The AAC has recently revamped the website, serving English and French, and you can use Google Translate too to get Britain, because British is a language of its own as well. We do have a responsibility to make sure the information is accessible. And again, we put out these codes of safe practices. They're on QR code hard hat stickers. We're just giving them away to everyone. We've got to lever the conversations. Platforms like this are another way of doing that. So, again, I give you guys some praise and kudos for that. But this is another way of getting it out, that people are having the conversation. So we can all do a better job is the cliche answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's appreciate that. And thank you. But it's for some people, it's an unknown, right? They don't know what they don't know. And then it becomes, they do realize what they don't know. But then at that point, there's a tipping point because then it's a choice. Because as soon as they realize they don't know, they've got a choice. Do they want to know and go figure it out and get better or not? And that's the point, isn't it? But let's bring it down to the project level now, and let's start to think about first scaffolder turning up on site in Canada tomorrow morning. What does that environment look like for them? Is that much different? I don't know. We'll try and figure it out, and I think it'll be a nice conversation for us to have. But what's it like for them? How much the work is properly designed? What's the documentation like? What do they expect on their day-to-day? What happens when they turn up? Do you know what I mean? What's that actually like, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, as you know, Canada's multicultural. We do actually get a lot of people from different places. New Canadians is a huge target because as a nation, we can't grow without immigration. We need it. So what are we doing to guide people into our trade, into our industry? Rise is one of those forums that I've championed for that reason. But the direct answer is, excuse me, the language says you can go to, the local store, pick up some scaffold and build it. And this is where I think the residential sector has a massive problem. That's generally where people start, right? They get a job with a buddy and a friend and they start doing it. We've got stucco guys and brick guys, and everybody's just doing scaffolding to serve their work, and they're doing it very unsafely. And there's not enough guidance, or it's not their job to just ticket people. They don't want to just give tickets. That doesn't curb the behavior. The knowledge does. We need to get people out there providing that information. But what we really need to do is get them into programs. I love the idea that our schools are currently putting trades programs together. We do have that happening in Canada kind of as a whole. Some provinces are doing it better than others, but there's various different programs that are starting conversations of the trades. So they would generally come to Canada, if they're interested in our trade, look to our association, and we would provide some insight into, the legislation, where to find it and best practices. And where we have to do a better job is exactly what region they're in, where to go. Training is a topic that is very much aligned with the fact that scaffolding is not a trade, because where do you go get it? You have access to training that are private. You have access to training that is, read a book and write a test. You have access to better training generally through different labor groups like the unions, depending on whatever region, and they have programs that are multi-week. So it's more on like the end user, like what do you want to do to get yourself certified? And that's where the industrial again comes into play, because you get better pay if you're recognized as a competent worker in some way. If you're recognized that, oh, you're a journey person. Well, who's certifying you? Well, I got that ticket here. And if you can prove your hours and you can prove that certification, the industry will generally still pay you. Going right back to the global problem, we've got to really set a standard so that everyone can follow it. And then we can standardize the quality of training across the board.
Yeah. And that's a common theme that everyone that we talk to says the same thing. The residential market is well behind the commercial and the industrial. And I think a lot of it, what it comes back to is the actual overarching legislation and having somebody to actually be able to police it.
Yeah.
It's all well and good to have a set of documents. And I think you guys are come under the OSHA legislation, but it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Legislation is one thing, but if you don't have the people there to actually enforce it, what's the point on having it? It's just words written on a piece of paper. So how does it work like in Canada? Like, do you actively have inspectors going around to sites, turning up, doing audits, placing fines? What's the kind of improvement process there in the legislation?
Yeah, we do. In every municipality, every region, every province, the OSHA inspectors, OSHA is generally, the US based, but we do have these things in place. But what we have to recognize is that inspectors that come to construction sites, they're also going to the grocery stores. They're also checking restaurants. They're doing compliance checks for bookstores. And you know what? They don't really like to come to construction sites because they get yelled at. So we actually, at our AGM for the association, we had an OH&S inspector come in. He's like, we limit our personnel to 2 access and construction inspections a week. Limit. And it's like, but they're all bad out there. He's like, yeah, but we have to consider the mental health of our own workers. Right. And because they're just going to get yelled at by some contractor all the time. There is a massive amount of opportunity to improve. I'd love to see the association play a role in that as we continue to grow and we get more resources to do so. What that is still unknown relatively. And this is where, having the conversations with the global community is important so that we are aligning ourselves with global standards along with everybody else. Right?
And what role does the actual job sites take in that? So are the actual contractors themselves policing it, or do the scaffolders police it themselves? If you're under-resourced from a regulation point of view, somebody's got to pick up the slack.
Yeah. And I'm sure it's the same with your projects. The larger scale projects, the tier 1 contractors, they have their own safety, right? And, they're out there generally doing their job. They're supposed to be, we call them construction safety officer, CSO, NCSO, National Construction Safety Officer. I got my NCSO because, again, I thought everything wanted to kill me. So I was like, that'll be the knowledge I need to protect myself. But if you're good at your job, you don't look at yourself as an officer. You look at yourself as a resource, a knowledge resource. And that does happen generally as they get out there. There are life-saving absolutes that we just say, you're not tied off at heights, you're done. We're saving your life by firing you, get off the job site. There's no reason. And again, we have legislation now that could fine the supervision for infractions like that. So on-site is now policing it because they can't keep up. But again, there's less on-site safety for that residential industry. And this is why it's just like, I can't think of a residential scaffold that I see that is fully compliant.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point. Let me ask you this, two parts to this question. Let's see if we give a short and poignant answer, Brandon. Let's have a look. What worries you most about the future for the scaffolder on the ground, and what excites you most for the future of the scaffolder?
The biggest worry right now for me is the lack of skills, the gap we have, the people that are retiring with the knowledge to the new workers. What excites me is we absolutely have a fresh, new mindset generation coming in that is accepting of change, willing and looking forward to the innovation. And we're actively teaching new practices that involve them in that planning, in that executing, in that role where they are leaders at every level. And that's what we're teaching to the new generation. So it would be exciting to be getting into the industry. And the pay is generally really well. across the board. So make good money while doing good work.
Yep. Mate, I think we could talk about this for ages, and we're only just scratching the surface. And I think we're going to have to do a part 2 on this. But I want to drill you with a little bit of a question that's been running around in my mind for a little bit now, right? So where do you, as I guess, let's call it the leader of the association now, sitting at the top of the tree at the Access Association, also got your own business, been around it a long time. Like, there's not many people that have got the level of insight that you do. So where do you genuinely think that Canada leads the rest of the world, and where does it need to improve? So two-part question. And then to follow on with that, I'm going to challenge you to say, as the leader of that association, what should your top priorities be for closing that gap where you're behind the rest of the world?
Yeah. Good question.
Smoky. It's on fire. Look, the sun's come up. It's absolutely
Just for the record,
on fire.
man, every time I've asked a question, he said it was a good question. I don't think he said it for you once.
Mate, you hear what you want to hear. That's fine.
Okay, Canada. I think we're very strong. I don't know about leading, but we're very strong in a group that is actively seeking to improve the industry. This is a kudos to my cohorts. This is what I've seen in the industry. We talk about Kaizen and that ever improvement process. Everywhere I go, I see industry, corporations, and down to the worker always trying to improve. Now, again, that might be my bias, but I see that. Now, and I'm going to say that from a process perspective as well, because that'll tie into my answer with the question. Where we're behind is, I think we cannot get legislation to catch up. We cannot impact local legislation strong enough. And that, as an association, is where I think we fall behind on being able to actually drive change. We're seeing things happen in legislation without our voice. And that's going to be where is my next 2 years at least here is going to be a focus, is like we're making sure we're at the table in the conversation and making sure that the industry is able to get information from us so they know to come to us first.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say add my 2 cents into that too. I mean, I luckily enough, get to speak to a lot of people around the world in the industry. And, my opinion is the Canadian market is far superior to any other market in the world at adopting change and genuinely trying to improve the industry. And this is at a high corporate level. The industries and the conversations with those people are all about finding ways to improve and get efficiencies and make it safer. So, I think credit where credit's due. The Canadian guys are really surging ahead at the moment. So
thank you.
Well done.
I'll pass that along to all the Canadians. We know everyone.
Yeah, from Simon. Simon said that.
Yeah, I think
says.
everyone could learn from that. Like, genuinely, I don't often. One of the things we're in danger of going off down a tangent here, but one of the people in Britain, it's pockets, it's little groups that push ahead. The NASD more recently, have really done a good job, but for a long period of time, it was quite stagnant. And change is becoming more prevalent in the conversation now, and positive change and what to do with that. And that coordination is coming together. And, we did a show about that, and I'm not going to repeat it, but that's starting to go away. And I think we echo what Simon said, because a lot of the time, in unwillingness, everyone's familiar with the change adoption curve, right? And scaffolding industry sits firmly on the back of that curve. And we all face that, right, in the day job of trying to convince people that, hey, we've got some of the technology here that's going to make you more money, save lives. I mean, you can do more with less. And they're like, well, what do I want that for?
Because I'll say that a decade ago, Canada was disparate. We had the association, Ontario chapter and Western Canada chapter, and everybody trying to do their own thing. The immediate past president, Rick McKinley's, he spent the last 8 years bringing it all together, and he set the bar for me here to take over and take it to the next level. But if he hadn't done what he's done, and we were the same. So, good for the NASC, and again, looking forward to working with them in the future, and, getting more alignment globally. I think just as an industry, I think, we're all honing down to who are the people in the room looking to affect change. You guys are some of those individuals. It's very easily identifiable about who's in the room and who's not in the room. And I always say that. You guys have heard me say that.
A lot of people do this, right, Brandon?
Yeah.
There's a lot of this.
Yeah.
Not that many people back it up with action. And I think that can be related to across the board.
Yeah.
Ben, can you describe what doing this is for the people that are not watching at home?
Talk a lot. Like us. No, but you know what I'm saying? It's one thing saying it, right? But not a lot of people actually go and do it. It used to, again, let's not get into a big whine about it, but some people go and do stuff. They write codes, they do training, they offer to, they volunteer, they get involved with the organizations. They're at the forefront with their own businesses, doing initiatives, driving it forward, wanting to do stuff. And some people just sit there on their hands doing nothing, often whining. You know what I mean? And it's like, you know, you're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. And for me, it's really clear cut. There is nothing in the middle. You're part of the problem, part of the solution. I think people recognize that and actually think, well, which side of that fence do I want to be on? You know?
And it's more obvious now than ever. You know, people know who's out there pushing the standards, trying to get better. And they also know the guys that are not. So it's more obvious than ever which guys are trying to improve.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to end that conversation. Great job. Simon,
great
question.
question.
Yours.
So leading on from great questions, we'll go into another great segment, which is everybody's favorite. It's time for the penthouse to the doghouse.
Simon, if you could, just for us here.
It's not as dark anymore, is it?
No, it's not.
The sun's come up now.
Yeah. That's right. Looks beautiful.
So are you trying to say that I'm a rock star? Like, you guys keep referring back to the Queen cover. So
I like it.
No,
it's just I'm taking from this.
It's so old and popular with old people.
That's right. That's right. That's my forte.
Right, we're going to have a look at this photograph then. I've got a series of photographs. Kindly surprised by our guest today. So let me have a look here. Let's have a look. Here we go. Rock and roll. Why don't you give us a talk through what this is?
Yes.
Brandon, what are we looking at right here? And I'm going to just flick through some of these pictures, and I hope I've picked photos from all the same projects and not just randomly.
Yeah.
Somehow.
While you got this one up, I mean, this was pretty cool because what you're looking at are pipe racks. Pipe racks, for those that don't know, they're generally set in modules. They come together, they do welds. Wherever the mods need to connect, you need access to it. You know, every module you see is 20 to 40 feet, and there are hundreds of feet that this thing needs to go. So multiple levels.
Brandon, it's worth saying, before you do that, tell us what are we looking at here? We're looking at a new build petrochem site or an oil refinery or something like that, right? This is a heavy industrial. Looks like it's in the middle of nowhere. Big site setup, obviously big big some kind of chemical oil.
These are the oil sands you're looking at part of. And yes, this was a secondary extraction expansion that you're seeing here. Basically, you know, to oversimplify, all those pipes run back and forth between heaters. They boil it. It goes away to cool. It comes back. They boil it some more. Eventually it comes out and they process it down the line.
Let's have a look.
Yeah. And so very cool stuff happening here. You know, there was the ground is soft. The steel is solid. There were so many situations where you couldn't have any legs on the ground or anything like that. You know, at the same time, you're trying to plan for, you know, what you can see here is cable trays and pipes that are coming in. They've got to fly these things in and out. So this was just a really cool project to be a part of, where you were constantly planning major builds, monsters. This project in particular had 26 million pounds of scaffolding on it around this time. These pictures are here. No, it didn't do the 360 for you. And you just see that it seems like it goes on forever. I mean, you literally have to drive around these sites. This is how big they are.
Yeah, this reminds me of Hinkley Point. I imagine you've worked on quite a few projects like this though, right, Simon? This is typical heavy industrial in your part of Australia, right?
Yeah, it looks very similar to the Australian market too, because generally a lot of our big industrial projects are in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Like you can see in the background here, there's literally nothing. Same as in the Australian markets. They're generally out in the outback or in regional locations where there's no towns. You got to build your own camps for the workers to fly in and fly out of.
Actually, you could see one of the pictures back. I don't know if that was the camps or the offices, but yeah, exactly. You live on site. You know, it's, and I do like to talk about these things because, you know, the world goes round and people don't realize what's involved in making, you know, what you have access to in your grocery store every day comes from something like this. So very important that, you know, understanding these industries are very far reaching. We're seeing it politically today, the impact of just cutting off just a little bit of that. So, but this was a crazy, there's 600 scaffolders working on this project. And so if you are not planning and every day you've got to have work for 600 people coordinate. It's
cool.
It is cool.
So, Brandon, on a project like this, is this man and materials type project, or you've got a quoted like fixed price, or how do you plan for that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality it is time and material. It's impossible to do this quoted. What sucks for the project owner is they're always going to push back on anything you put forward because they just have no transparency and understanding what it's going to cost. They know they're going to spend a couple $100 million on this, but they don't know what the real cost is going to be. So every time you say something, I need a little more manpower. Do you really? Can you justify why? And, after 4 years on a project like this, you get really tired of always trying to explain yourself. This is where I see the future, the innovative tools that are coming out with design and planning and executing. These platforms are going to just change that conversation. In fact, they're going to come to you and say, it looks like you're going to need a little more manpower. Can you bring 20 more guys in? That's where it's going to go. Yeah. So, yeah.
And that's the challenge with these jobs. Like any time and materials jobs, they're set up for the contractor to come in, go as slow as they possibly can, use as many people as they possibly can, and as many materials as they can, because that's how they make money. And so by having the project owner to be able to push them, but also have the information to know when they need to push and when they not need to push, and being able to have the full picture of the entire work life cycle is critical. It's like it just can't happen without it.
Yeah. And with you guys, like you guys probably know, we say in industrial, the real productive time is 30%. That's hammer time. Everything else is safety, getting set up, stand downs, everything. Like this is what it really actually turns out to be. So they prepare themselves with that mindset, and then people start to work towards that. And so without having any kind of KPI to track to at all, that's consistent and real clean data, there really is, no conversation happening. So kind of exciting to see where these things do go in the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, from something very large and significant and obviously very well planned to something else not so large and slightly less well planned.
Well, I'm scared where you're going with this.
Simon?
Don't look at me.
Do you want to see the doghouse picture?
Let's do it. That's what you're talking about. Okay, sorry, I understand now.
I mean, I wasn't talking about your... No, I'll not go there.
You don't.
No. Let's have a look. Let's have a look. So this...
is that a ladder on the roof?
That's the decking.
This scaffold is epic.
Would you call that a scaffold?
That I reckon that's the heaviest pigeon in the world. Look, it's bent that tube.
It's just leaning down.
That pigeon is so heavy. Look at it. It's like, mate. I mean, I was looking at it because at first I couldn't see that there were any standards on the inside. I was like, well, what is it? How can there be any? But it can't just be that one tube. What's that fixed to? And then I realized there's some tubes in here. Look, can you see it on the roof?
On the roof.
And then I thought, is that a ladder? Is that a ladder laid flat, or is that like a bit of composite deck? But I think it's a ladder.
At least ladders are load bearing, not in horizontal format.
Yeah. Look at this.
Wow.
Right.
That pigeon's well
fed. Who wants to have a go at this then? Brandon, you're going to take it on. Do you know the drill? So the doghouse, you've got 30 seconds. You are the person that put this scaffold up. This is your scaffold. And you've got 30 seconds to justify to Simon and I, who are the health and safety police, just why this scaffold is absolutely fine and fit for purpose. Are you ready for it?
Holy. Yes, let's do it.
Ready? Okay.
Let's go.
3, 2, 1, go.
As you can see, I put an overhead protection here for with the door with the ladder placement. We've put a perch to keep the pigeons off to the side. That way they're not pooping as you walk out the door. We've put all the materials at heights. So, just in case they do fall down, it's going to take you right out and you don't have to worry about tomorrow. So absolutely, this is the best way to get your job done at the most effective cost possible.
Well done.
Well done, Brandon.
Oh, it's funny, man. I can't
It's
believe
so
you
hard.
I can't
It's
believe
so
you didn't
difficult.
comment on the single handrail that you've got on there.
Oh, you
I
don't
mean,
need
that's
handrails.
obviously- I mean, you are safety conscious.
How else are you
I
going to do
think
your
I'm
work
back
if
to
you
the
have
builder.
handrails in the way?
I mean,
How
how much
going
did
back
that
to who
cost?
built the house? I can't believe they built that gutter. You can see the gutter above the doors out of level because the scaffold tube
it
would
look-
be.
It
must be
looks to
level.
me like this is an extension. This here is an
There's some rebar
extension.
coming
You
out,
see-
yeah.
it's just and
But they're very
Well,
progressive. Did you
I-
guys notice the solar panels? You know, really, really environment conscious here.
I've struggled with this today. I saw it on our favorite Facebook group and Scaff Police. You should check it out, Brandon. The guys on there are wicked. But I was looking into that. I was perplexed. I was like, I can't figure it out. Genuinely, this is
If
one of the
if that
best
second
ones.
pigeon goes out to, Pigeon Love over there, that thing's falling down. 'Cause he's got to stay right there. He's the
If you
counterbalance at
rock
this
back
point.
and forth with it. That was solid pigeoning. Solid.
We're
Pigeoning.
getting cancelled
haven't-
this week.
We haven't had a pigeon reference since the Dove from Above in British TV.
That's Napoleon
They're
Dynamite
not
there.
even pigeons, but they're close enough.
You guys are embarrassing me.
Yeah.
I
is
think that
wild.
every week, mate.
I'm just so curious what the homeowner is thinking too. It's like, yeah, looking good up there, boys. Yeah, have
Want a
some
coffee?
tea.
Well done, lads.
I would say
reckon
the homeowner actually built it himself. No self-respecting scaffolder would have done that.
You know
That's
what?
probably Clive's house, opposite the one he showed us when he was on. That's what he did. He admitted he was a scaffolder.
Yeah, that's right.
Nah, that's cool. That's funny. Look, it's always an interesting end to have a little bit of a crack with the penthouse to the doghouse, but it's time for us to wrap up, guys. So I just want to say big thank you to Brandon for joining us. Fantastic guest, really insightful and brilliant to hear everything about what you're doing at the moment and the industry in Canada. Thank you, Simon, for being a great co-host as ever. And if you want to send your photographs into us to feature on the show, please email them into podcast@braceyourself.online and we will have a look through them and see if any of them make it. Tell your friends about the show. Please hit subscribe. Do the usual thing. We can't do this without a massive following, and we need more than the 3 people we've got at the moment. Simon and my mum are not going to look after us for the rest of our life, and hopefully Brandon will subscribe now, so we'll be cool. Thank you to Awesome. You do a great job all the time. Thank you to our sponsors and supporters. And yeah, until next time, we will see you then. Thank you, everybody, and goodbye.